Conclave. Before we proceed, I'd like to bring on stage Times Now's Navika Kumar to introduce the Finance Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.
That's a tall guy before me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And, we've been talking about 5 trillion economy in India. Why have we just been talking about it? The issue is that we are a country that seems to be bogged down with this whole terminology of slow down, slow down, slow down. It's time from aspiration to action, and that's the theme of our India Economic Conclave in 2019. And who better than Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who's going to be joining us in just a bit to give us that sense of direction and all the questions that have been raised here. And of course, by my esteemed predecessor here on the stage, Manish Chokhani, on what it takes to get India up and running like an athlete, rather than trying to find ways and means to stop him and distract his attention. Thank you very much, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. We've had a very, very important morning here of deliberations. Today we are talking about an economy of $5 trillion. That was the Prime Minister's dream. He announced to the country sometime early last year, and we took it in great earnest, and this is our second conclave, which is talking about the 5 trillion economy in India. But this time, we're looking at the theme, aspiration to action. Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, after all this conversation and talk about the sentiment and the slowdown, do you think we are on track to achieve a 5 trillion economy by 2024, as the Prime Minister had dreamt and this country dreams?
We are making every effort that we are on track.
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
I'm constantly, yes, I'm in constant touch with the industry. There's a lot of echo in my voice.
Okay, we'll just sort out that audio echo. Can we just sort out the audio, please?
So I'm in touch with all the industry and also various sectors which are seeking our intervention if they need. With that, which is being constantly attended to, I expect we'll be on track for the $5 trillion economy.
Ms. Sitharaman, we've been looking at the GDP numbers. The GDP numbers are somewhere around 4.5%. If we have to achieve 5 trillion by 2024, it means in the remaining 4 years, we need to grow at around 14.5%. Is that something that's doable in the present scenario that we are looking at in the Indian economy?
Well, I'm not going to be engaging in numbers, not because I want to escape an answer, but clearly my effort at this time, when I'm positioning India in a background of the challenges which are being felt, I need to attend to the challenges and redress any difficulties. So I'm looking at it in that way rather than looking at what would it be for the next year, is it this figure or that figure. So specifically to your question, I am not going to be placing our numbers today as opposed to what it should be. I try to put my effort towards moving it to that number which you want India to grow in, which is probably the reality, but I'll have to only keep focusing my attention to moving towards achieving the target.
Ma'am, Nirmala Sitharaman, you have announced several measures in the recent past to kickstart the economy, whether it's the cut in corporate taxes, whether it's addressing of the problems in the real estate segment, the home buyer segment, the completion of units that are somewhere hanging in between. The question many people ask is that, are there any other measures that you can take in terms of the stimulus given the situation on the fiscal deficit side? Do you have the fiscal room? And given the fact that GST collections have been somewhat of a worry as we've been reading in the reports that have come out recently.
First, on the GST collections, I'm making sure that I'm working together with the states, and many states, I must put it on record here because you have an audience before you who are from all parts of the country, I presume, and are also who are keen to know how we are going to boost our GST revenues. I'm working with so many different states, each one of whom have taken a lot of effort in wanting to boost from their end, put the effort from their end to improve on the GST collections. So many of those efforts which the states themselves are doing, I really appreciate and put on record my sense of gratitude to them, because in the collective interest of cooperative federalism, many of the states are really pushing it from their end too. So I guess with their efforts and also with the efforts of the center and all the revenue department officials who I am closely following with on the various steps that they are taking, I am able to see that the prospects of improving the GST collections are likely to go up, and therefore, I hope that that would itself address the immediate question of GST revenues. And that effort I shall keep continuing to do. That is one side of the question that you had asked. But on the other, I am also making sure that the stimulus, particularly aiming at improving consumption and also aiming at having money in the hands of the people. We are pushing hard on very many of these programs, the flagship programs, which have a bearing on the rural economy, whether it's the PM Kisan Samman Yojana, whether it's Manrega. We are ensuring that money goes quickly to those schemes, and they are also pushed forward to the people who should be benefiting from them. Other than that, in respect of the stimulus that I have to offer, public investment in infrastructure is something which I have taken very seriously. I am making sure that I front load as much as possible of the amount which is dedicated for infrastructure building from the public treasuries. I have made sure that the pipeline of projects is ready, and we are making sure that sooner some of them will be actually receiving the funds for it, and that is within the first 6 months of this government, that is. And the last point on consumption, putting money in the hands of people and ensuring that money should reach people who have rendered services. I am sitting with the expenditure secretary and making sure that the government, if it owes any money for the goods and services it has received, particularly from the MSME sector, and so also the public sector undertakings which have to pay money to these MSMEs for the services that they have received, is given a clear push so that we don't sit on others' monies. So I must put on record that Secretary Expenditure earlier, Sri Murmu, who is now with the JNK, had put effort to release up to 61,000 crores which were due to the MSMEs from government departments. Now I am making sure no other amount is left behind, and the public sector enterprises also clear up their bills. So these are some specific efforts, but this is continuously ongoing.
Ms. Sitharaman, let's look at the numbers of the GST collections. Your target was 6,63,000 for GST collections, and in the current financial year, in the first 8 months, we've clocked only 50% of those collections. As far as the compensation cess is concerned, 1,10,000 crore was the target, and we are sitting at about 64.5 crores. Do you think your meeting on the GST Council just 2 days from now is going to be looking at some radical steps? Are you going to look at the slabs? Are you going to look at the items that are being done? There is conversation, and I know you've said this in your statements earlier, that everywhere this conversation is going on except in your office. But the fact is, there is some sort of an anticipation in the market that the 5 and 12% slabs may go up to 8 and 18%. Is there something that you'd like to say on which direction this GST Council meeting is going to be taking?
As regards the GST slabs and the rates, I don't think we have had enough discussion even within the ministry yet on these slabs and the rates. And therefore, like the way I mentioned earlier, this discussion is everywhere else rather than in my office. So I don't think I'm even talking about raising or rationalizing the slabs at all at this stage. But eventually sometime maybe the GST Council would want to talk about it, but I have not readied myself for this particular meeting on this particular issue. That is why I keep repeating that this is something which is a buzz everywhere, but not so much in my team. So that is one thing. Second thing is about the compensation. I want to repeat that the numbers that you've said is all that is factual. Yes, right. And I also admit that the payments which had to go on the compensation head has not been given for the two-month slots. And the collection is one of the reasons. And much before I go into that, the collection and the fall in the collection or not really growing in the numbers that it should grow in have several reasons to it. We've given extension for filing of returns in some districts which were flood affected. And when I say some districts, you might say in a large country like this, do some districts matter? No, some districts which have huge potential have been affected because of floods, and we had to extend the dates. That is one reason. Second, of course, in certain sectors there have been challenges as a result of which consumption would have come down, and this is a consumption based tax, and naturally the collection would be affected because of that. So there are several reasons, all of which have brought in one consequence, and that is the growth in the collection is not as much as we wanted it to be.
So Ms. Sitharaman, what would you say to states, especially those ruled by opposition parties, who have said that it is embarrassing for states to continue to ask the center to pay up the dues for the state, and they say this was a matter of their right, which was something that was promised when GST as a reform was first rolled in by your government in the last tenure, and now they're seeing this as reneging of the center's promise to the states?
I fully appreciate that point, and I do not disagree with them. If they say that it is embarrassing, yes, it will be embarrassing, and I do not want them to feel embarrassed because it's not their fault, nor is it personally my fault. I'd rather give them yesterday than today, and there are obviously reasons. I've elaborated on all this in the House, in the Parliament, in the Rajya Sabha. So it is certainly their right. I'm not denying that at all. At the same time, I'm also making clear to say I'm not reneging on that. States will be given. We are certainly not reneging on it. And we also want to appreciate the fact that we understand it will be difficult for the states. I'm not at all at disagreement, but it is a matter of fact.
So Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, all those who today say that there are the three big reforms that your government undertook over the last 5.5 years. Reform number 1, DEMO. Reform number 2, GST. Reform number 3, merger of banks, several public sector banks being merged under one head, at least 4 such heads coming up. Not any of these reforms really giving the dividends in terms of growth, expansion of the Indian economy as people would have expected. So would you say that these reforms have gone wrong, as many critics keep pointing out to you day after day?
I don't agree at all on the conclusion that you've made that these reforms have not worked. These are major reforms because they have an impact on several layers within the economy. If demonetization had to suck out certain amount of monies which were not really let us say tax paid, it did achieve that. And it also sort of made sure that economy gets far more formalized. And these do have an impact when industries, small, big, medium, all of whom will have to adjust to the restructured work ethic, work culture and the work business model in which they have to start functioning in a formalized setup. And if they remained informal, not all of them, in fact many of them were not wrong, that was fine earlier. But now we are saying there are a lot more reasons to be formal, and by becoming formal they have a lot more benefits to derive, like the way in the GST, they get input credits if they are on the scheme, if they are not, they even can be in the compensation and pay rather far lesser tax than otherwise. So the benefits of getting formal are there for everybody to see. So it is not right to conclude that these have not worked at all. But of course, yes, there are teething problems. There are problems as you go when people start feeling and getting a party to it and becoming a part of that system. There are ways in which benefits can be derived if it is tweaked to everybody's advantage. So the tweaking does take time. And the tweaking is also multifarious, because if one section wants a tweak, some other feels no, it adversely affects them. So we have to constantly keep balancing the inputs which come and accordingly change the system to help everybody. So the teething problems cannot be taken as a conclusion for saying it's not working. Problems do come up as every one of us are getting into a formal system, as every one of us are getting into a technology driven system, and as every one of us are wanting to, even being there, wanting to expand into our business. So I can understand the difficulties, but yet I wouldn't reject moving ahead, moving forward with the system which is in place and which has benefits for all of us.
The latest numbers that have come in, factory output down to 3.8% in October, below the 4.3% in September, and much below the 8.4% that happened in October of last year. Also, if you look at consumer durables consumption, that's been on a lower trajectory as well. When are we going to see the reversal in these trends? Any estimates that the Finance Ministry has worked out on this? Are there any green shoots that are visible from your interactions as yet? Or are we in for the long haul?
Well, I think I did answer this question once earlier too. I am not going to spend time seeing as to when it is going to be reversed. I am at it. As long as anybody wants government to intervene, we shall intervene, and we shall keep going till every sector feels all right, we are on track now, we are moving forward, so that's okay. Till then, I think my focus will be only purely attending to everybody rather than calculate as to from when I can sit and watch the whole thing.
I know, Ms. Sitharaman, this whole hall is full of people who understand business, finance, but there is the Aam Aadmi out there. And there is a lot of buzz about the slowdown in the economy and the fact that some studies say that employment rates are coming down. Some other studies, for example, the ratings agency CARE says that there is some sort of an arrest in the unemployment growth. How do you look at the employment numbers, and do you think for 5 years it's been promised that there would be a formal number crunching machinery within the government to capture this kind of data? Do you think we are any closer to that, and what the real numbers on employment, or rather unemployment growth, are?
On the numbers, there's a lot of work going on, and I know the National Statistical Commission and also the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation are doing a lot of consultation, talk, and also getting inputs for the various numbers that the government produces, whether it is the GDP, whether it is the CPI, WPI, whether it is also looking at employment. Data is something which the government has been looking at for the couple of last months, and making sure that any misgivings about the data will be addressed, so that the data from government, irrespective of whichever they reflect, is going to be credible for people to accept. And therefore, I know, to be fair to that ministry, a lot of work is going on that front. But as regards a specific question on unemployment data, I think I will bank on that, saying particularly on the informal sector, not just now, not just in last 5 years, but Government of India's data collection on employment, particularly relating to the informal sector, has not been comprehensive, not because nobody wanted it, but data collection focused more on the formal sectors. And within the formal sector also, only a certain percentage was collected as data. So, if in India a large section depends on non-formal or informal sectors, unorganized sectors, data on that is not comprehensively collected, not now, not ever before. And therefore, when we talk of unemployment and employment, we are talking with very sketchy figures before us. So, it's an area in which it may not be adequate for me to have before me and comment, but again, the extent of employment in the informal sector, that India's flagship programs, whether it is Mudra, whether it is aiming to have the JAM Trinity being brought on, is something which we have to speak about, but speak about based on data coming from the banks. How many people have received Mudra, what category of Mudra, and so on. Again, that may not be all that adequate, but the fact remains that Mudra has been one of the main sources of employment generation, not in the formal, but largely in the informal sector.
Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, your critics sometimes say this, that the government is in denial mode. You will not address the issue of prices, on why we failed to probably get an early warning on prices of food commodities when they were rising, the famous onion controversy in Parliament, which put you in the center, whether it's unemployment. Somewhere are we in denial mode, because we seem to always suggest everything is all right, everything is going on, but that's not the feeling the Aam Aadmi or the Aam businessman gets on the ground. Where is the disconnect, Ms. Finance Minister?
If I am addressing issues based on the inputs that I am getting from the various sectors, is that denying that there exist challenges? If I am not answering a question the way in which somebody wants me to answer, I have no disputes or contradictions if they want me to say I am in denial. But I have my way of not just talking, but also addressing the challenges faced by the economy. So, to then say you are in denial, well, this is a country which allows every one of us to speak, give our opinions, and I hear the opinions with great regard and respect, but that says it all.
Ms. Sitharaman, the question of reforms, you know, it's unfinished agenda, whether it is DEMO, GST, merger of banks, we've seen one side. The other side is, are we going to go ahead with land, labor reforms? Are we even thinking about bringing down the government's holding in public sector banks below the 50% level? You know, you don't have to start disinvesting today, but is this something even on the agenda coming up, considering that you just kicked off your pre-budget consultations and internal meetings this morning?
Yes, actually, my pre-budget consultations were on, and I had to excuse myself from one of them to attend to this program. The reform momentum will continue. In fact, the government has very clearly committed itself for reform, and reform in the labor area is already happening. 44 different labor codes have been brought in to become 44 different labor laws have now become into being 4 different codes, and those will now be simplified so that compliance is made easier. That is about the labor, and also looking at the various ways in which new industry require their recruitments to happen, to their employments to happen, and in order to make sure that the labor does not suffer because of these kind of changes, all kinds of labor who are being recruited, temporary, seasonal, are all being brought to be at par with regular workers. So, there is a lot of change and reform happening in the labor area, and for which extensive consultations were held by the concerned ministry. I must put it on record that the Labour Ministry has met up with a lot of people and taken their feedback. As regards land, it is a question of both the state governments and the centre working together on it. Land related activities like agriculture, a lot of reforms and pushing for electronic market access for the farmer, giving him additional income. And I have announced in the budget 10,000 farmer producer organizations will be formed. Artisans will be given the benefit because of their trade, and artisans are also partly people who are depending on land. So, yes, a lot of work is happening, but here I would want to underline, as I would underline in issues related to GST, both centre and states will have to work together.
Ms. Sitharaman, you are also a very astute political leader, and let me ask you, how do you respond to criticism when it comes from Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who in a speech in Ramleela Maidan just about 48 hours ago said that your government was a government that only looked at a few industrialists, the Adanis and Anil Ambani he mentioned, and he says all big contracts of you know, roads and airports going to some companies, and on the other hand Mr. P. Chidambaram, the former finance minister, who comes out and says that the Citizenship Amendment Bill, Article 370 abrogation, all these are issues that have created turmoil in the society and have taken away the attention from a flagging economy. How do you respond to these political attacks that have been made against your government?
Well, I suppose the charges of supporting a few industry leaders and not the common man, I think the one simple line of answer that I can give is, the people took a call in May 2019, and if that allegation had any merit in it, do you think that they would have voted in the way in which they voted for Prime Minister Modi all over again, with increasing numbers, for a party to come back without a break for the second term with a larger majority? Is that possible in a country like India? So, the allegations which the Congress former president and now probably likely to become president again, Shri Rahul Gandhi has put, has never had any resonance with the people of India. So that is political answer enough for him to realize that his baseless allegations don't find any space with the common Indian. And also about the way in which criticism is and allegation that you're splitting the country and other things are being leveled as regards this Citizenship Amendment Now Act passed in the Parliament, both houses of the Parliament, and on Article 370. It's surprising that the Congress party behaves as though they have heard of it only now. They have been part of our manifesto. We've done our election campaign on it. We've mobilized the public to vote for us on it. People have heard us speak about it, not just in the last election, but even the one before and for several years before that too. They are part of our manifesto. We are duty bound to implement them. And to suddenly whip up emotions saying you're doing this just shows their frustration. What they should have done, keeping the interest of this country in mind, they have never done. And to talk down on the economy, I would like to remind them, what was the state of the economy when they left in 2014? What was the level of corruption this country had got fed up with? And what was the impact of that corrupt, crony capitalistic attitude with which Congress run this country? The twin balance sheet problem, the fragile five problem, were all things which we have cleaned up in the last 5 years. And as a result, today the economy is just sort of looking at ways in which it can come out of that stress, and we are infusing not just confidence but equity where it's needed, assistance where it is needed, and trying to get everybody on their toes back again. We don't support corruption, we don't run a corrupt government, we've never kept inflation going skyrocketing. Inflation has been kept well under 4, macroeconomic fundamentals are strong, FPI is at its highest, foreign exchange reserve is at its highest, macroeconomic fundamentals being like this. Those who lecture to us on our economy should please speak out as to why they left it so much precariously in a situation when they left it in 2014. So it's all very well to talk. It's all very well to have preached something, it's all very well now to preach something, whereas when they were in power, they left a rotten system behind, corrupt, crony-ridden, and having spoiled the fundamentals of this country. So I think they should do a bit of introspection rather than talking down to others.
Raman, well, that's a round of applause coming up for you, Finance Minister. I think everybody in this hall appreciates the sentiment that you've expressed, but I want to ask you, for somebody who's passed out of the JNU, the Jawaharlal Nehru University in the capital, today we are seeing violent protests outside Jamia Millia. How do you see universities now becoming the center of opposition to your government?
Navika, universities are always the place where students at that age, all of us go through a very high level of idealism, and protests do happen. Protests have happened during Mrs. Indira Gandhi's time. Protests have happened after that, after several governments with different political dispensations which had come and gone. So protests in universities are not just happening nowadays. That said, I also would want to differentiate between protests sometimes which go out of hands of the university students' unions themselves, and sometimes when protests of that nature get support from mainstream political parties who align themselves with Maoists and also separatist elements, and when they extend support for India breaking groups, that is worrying. And that is why there again I go back to speaking about how misguided the Congress party, which was a part of the freedom movement. After all, Congress as a party was only a movement in which people of all shades of colors were associated during the freedom movement. And Mahatma Gandhi had said, now that the movement has achieved the Indian independence, Congress party, the so-called party that it became later, was to be disbanded. It is better to disband the Congress, was his few words. It converted itself to a political party, all right, and post that its agenda was not nation building, it became being subservient to a single family. And today you find them, in spite of periodically referring to that period where they were part of the whole set of Indian people who ran that movement for freedom, attaining freedom, which they successfully, all of us and our parents and grandparents were all associated with it. Periodically they keep referring, oh, we were freedom fighters and so on. But today what are you doing? You are participating in such little fringe group students movements which are part of university agitational phase, and participating, being with separatists, giving encouragement for such forces which are talking about breaking India. Does that help? So student movements, protests in universities are not thing of just today, they have been there before too, and I can understand that. But for us in political parties, it is important that we be sure that we do not encourage in the student movement guard forces which are against the country. Student movement is one, student protest is one, but it is a totally different thing to have jihadists or Maoists or separatist movements also getting into it, and we have to be wary of that kind of a development.
Is that what's happening in Jamia?
I wouldn't know what happened in Jamia last night, but
all right. Before I let you go, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, I just want to ask you, is this social turmoil taking away from the economic fight and the climb up to the $5 trillion economy? And that is the only worry of every single participant in this conclave tonight.
I don't think the challenges of the economy and the government's responses to them are going to be diluted, and I shall be personally, together with the Prime Minister, working towards engaging with every sector and making sure that their requirements are fulfilled, their challenges are met. However, equally I am confident that the Home Minister, Shri Amit Shah, and the Prime Minister are clearly seized of the way in which the society will have to be going in harmony, and whatever they are doing, they are explaining very well, even in the Parliament, answering every member of Parliament and their questions. They are also even today addressing in various parts of the country the leaders who want to talk to them about issues, if at all anything concerning the Citizenship Act. So, I am fully confident that this issue or that are equally being attended to. So, there is no undermining the economy and its agenda, there is no undermining India's unity and its harmony, which is important. On the contrary, I would say that festering problems which were left unattended due to one or the other reasons, call it appeasement or anything else, are being attended to now with a lot more clarity. But if that is causing worries in anybody's mind, be it the leaders of the Northeast, the Home Minister is personally addressing and talking to them and assuring them as to whatever steps that he is taking. So, I would take this opportunity to tell that invited august audience which is before you that we can assure you every step is being taken in order that India's economy goes forward and benefits all of us.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, for joining us here on the India Economic Conclave. A big round of applause to Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, Union
Thank you.
Finance Minister. And if you have any suggestions, questions, please mail them to us and we will forward them to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Thank you, Finance Minister, for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you, Navika, as well.